development impacts. And the sort of impacts that working with smallholders can deliver includes linking small-scale producers to well-functioning local or global markets that can reduce poverty and hunger. And here I want to emphasize local markets, because it's local domestic markets that really are going to have the biggest impact on development and poverty alleviation. We also work linking small-scale producers to global markets, but we try to ensure that in it we're also building the local markets. This type of business model can deliver improved productivity and therefore income for small-scale producers. They have better access to services, and they can have better infrastructure. And another important aspect is investing in women, because in many cases it's actually the majority of the workers are women, and it's only by investing in their training and development that the productivity increases can be achieved. And also by investing in women, it helps to improve nutritional and educational outcomes, because women tend to, the money they get tends to stay in the household or in the local economy. So let me give you two specific examples of exactly what I'm talking about, how inclusive business in the supply chain can work. The first example is Unilever, a company that we have had worked with over about 10 years. And we're just now starting a new project to work with them on an innovative sourcing model, which focuses on sourcing vegetables to use in their soups. And the project is being piloted in 2 countries, which will reach 100,000 small-scale producers and agricultural workers. Unilever is bringing to the project their expertise in agronomy. They're bringing some initial funding. They're obviously bringing the market access. Unilever is helping to bring our experience of working with communities, helping to organize the communities, and also we can link with, for example, donors who can help bring funding to overcome some of the challenges that I'll be talking about. And another important player in this chain, we have Unilever, we have the smallholders, we have Oxfam helping to organize the smallholders, but we'll also be a processor who will dehydrate the vegetables. And this is critical because that processor will be seeking customers other than Unilever, because it's not healthy for the value chain to be dependent on one customer. So very important in reducing risk is increasing the customers, and also through the cooperatives of the farmers, they will be developing new products and new markets locally. For Unilever, why do they want to do this? What's the business case? Well, Alex mentioned yesterday, Unilever's made a plan, a prediction that they're going to double their production in 10 years. And this is coming at a time when agricultural produce is becoming more expensive and more difficult to source. And Unilever realizes that the greatest potential to increase productivity actually lies with the smallholder sector. So it's critical for their sourcing. The development case, it's guaranteed incomes for the farmers, it's local market development. Again, the emphasis is not just working with Unilever, but developing the local market. It's access to services, particularly training, and there's a particular focus on women. And I'll give you an example from here in Colombia. And this is a project that my colleague Felipe is managing, and so I urge you, if you're interested, to seek him out and ask him all your questions, because he knows so much more about it than I do. But we're working here, actually here in the Cauca region, with about 200 small-scale dairy farmers, linking them to national, regional dairy value chain through Alpina and the Alpina Foundation. And it's really interesting because we're working with different communities here, with campesinos, with indigenous communities, and with Afro-descendant communities. The project started last last year, 2009, and the objective is to increase volumes and increase quality, particularly of the dairies produced here, and therefore increase incomes. It seeks to bring access to services and financing for the local producers, and we've brought in a financial institution. It seeks to increase women's participation, and one of the really interesting innovations here is in developing a role for women as in checking or verifying the quality of the milk, since the quality of the milk is the critical aspect of the success of this chain. And there is a business opportunity for women to play that role and to advance their economic leadership. And the project is already showing results, even though it's only been running for 1 year. We've been focusing on strengthening the local associations in those communities, on forming business plans, giving them training, and increasing the quality of the milk. And we've now reached a stage where the quality has increased significantly, incomes have increased as well, and really the quality they're producing is the same as any other producer that's supplying to Alpina. I want to talk about 5 principles related to this type of inclusive business. And here's where we really step away from agriculture, and these principles apply to any linkages between large companies and small-scale producers. This explains how these projects can be successful. And the most important principle, right at the heart, is chain-wide collaboration. In other words, fair returns for everyone in the value chain. And this requires a change in the business model and the business mentality, because usually purchasing means finding the right quality at the absolute cheapest price possible. And that's not what this is about. This is about working together to be able to compete collectively as a value chain. And it brings opportunities for innovation as different actors in the value chain adapt to changing market conditions. And it can help with problem identification and identification of solutions. The second is market linkages. So this is a key. Small-scale producers are often stuck in an informal sector, informal environment, and it's about bringing them a link to a well-functioning market. And in order for this to happen, the key is having an intermediary, a producer-led organization, a cooperative that can aggregate the products of the small-scale producers, but also help provide them with support, services, access to finance, and importantly, to give them a voice within the chain. The third is fair and transparent governance. So in the example with Unilever, a really critical aspect was transparent contracts, clarity about terms of trade, about expectations of standards, about pricing, and with clear, solid contracts, for example, producers can have better chance of accessing finance. It can also be good to build in a dispute resolution mechanism at the beginning. It doesn't have to be very formal, but it can help to smooth problems when they arise. It's about equitable sharing of costs and risks in the value chain. So again, the normal business model, the normal way a value chain works is whoever has the most power, usually those towards the end, nearest the customers, take the greatest amount of the profit. And those at the other end take the majority of the risk. And that's not what this is about. It's about fair sharing of risk and coming up with strategies to overcome them. So in agriculture, weather is a risk. How can we find micro-insurance that can help mitigate that risk? And finally, I've talked already, it's about enabling access to services, because that's what small-scale producers often lack. The point is not that the companies, the buyers, have to provide all those services, provide training, provide access to finance, provide infrastructure. But you need to understand that those are the barriers to making this work effectively and help to figure out how to overcome them, perhaps by bringing in third parties, government, community groups, NGOs, for example. Very briefly, just what has been the steps of working with small-scale producers in supply chains. First, identify the opportunity. I've already talked about the business case, security of supply, access to customers. Second is analysing the feasibility. Are there small-scale men and women producers that are interested? How does the cost relate to current costs? What would we need to invest to overcome barriers, for example? Third, engaging with stakeholders, obviously those who form part of the value chain, but also others, and I've already mentioned government, for example, civil society. Fourth, the heart of it is designing the program, and I think a better way to say this is adapting the business model. So I already talked about buyers, and buyers are looking for the cheapest price. And the reason they do that is because they're incentivized by the company. They get rewarded when they get low prices. So we need to change the incentives within the company. And usually this requires having senior level buy-in, because this is not a project on the side, but this comes right to the heart of purchasing. It comes to marketing perhaps and working with customers. And it requires that senior person in order to make these changes throughout the company. It involves also upgrading the different parts of the value chain, and I've already talked, for example, about working to strengthen or to create smallholder organizations and cooperatives, and that is critical also to ensure that their interests are represented. And finally, obviously, you want to measure the outcomes, understand where there are problems, make adaptations, manage risks. I don't want to say any of this is easy. Clearly, working with small-scale producers brings challenges. I've talked already about changes that have to be made inside of the company, barriers that are faced because of the lack of investment historically in small-scale producers, the lack of infrastructure. And new challenges come along all the time. So climate change in our agricultural work is a real challenge that we're facing.